did have a near-death experience. I'm 67 when I was 22, so many years ago, and it really sent me on a spiritual journey. And now I came back from that with some healing abilities, but it was back in the 1970s, and it wasn't like you look online. Well, you didn't look online for anything back then, or, the information about near-death experiences was not all over the place. Now there's even TV shows about it. It's like, so I didn't really know what to make of it. One thing I did notice right away, I started meeting a lot of people that had near-death experiences and a lot of spiritual teachers. Just what seemed like randomly, but it obviously wasn't. I also had my hands started to become very warm when I touched anyone, even for a moment. And, now it's like you'd think right away, oh, healing abilities, but I didn't even think of that back then. And so I started learning from these teachers and learned that energy can be used for healing. And then I developed those skills to work in different ways with people and, do healing over long distance. And it really changed my life in a good way. It's hard living this kind of life, when you're dedicated to something that's not about making money and, necessarily succeeding in the world. I was living in Colorado in the U.S., and my family was from the Northeast and just north of New York City. I had come back east to visit my parents, which I would do once in a while, and my roommate in Colorado was a friend of mine from high school, so his parents lived in the same area. We drove back, I forget, it's like 2,000-mile drive, but we did it pretty much straight through. So we got there, went to each of our family's houses and rested for a while, and we heard about a party that a friend from high school was having. So we went to the party. There was drinking and pot and other things that I don't do anymore these days. But so it was, kind of a cute story, but the end result was I was damaged physically. But the young lady having the party I thought was kind of cute, so I was kind of pretending to be a little more drunk than I thought I really was. And I asked my friend to drive me back to my parents' house, and I would go get the car the next day so I could, talk to this young lady who was a little too busy at her party, and it was so loud and everything. Almost all the way back to my parents' house, I realized my sister needed the car the next day. And I asked my friend to drive me back. He protested because, I told him I was too high to drive. And I explained to him that I was overacting that part, or I thought I was. And so I went back to the party. I went in to tell the young lady that I was taking my car. And I still have a vision of walking towards a door to leave the party. And it was a lot of people, music, but even the image in my mind is, people were a little hazy, and, sometimes when you drink, the colors get a little brighter, and it was like that. And I shouldn't have driven. I know that now, but back then I was young and foolish, let's say. So I don't remember getting in the car or anything else about driving until I was out of my body, in the white light, all around me white light, looking down. The car was smashed beyond what you could imagine someone to survive in. It was, really smashed. And my body was leaning against a tree, like sitting on the ground, my legs out like this, and a police officer was crouching over me. My head was cracked open, which part of it was all that seemed totally fine. Like everything just seemed really fine. It felt so loving, warm, and a certain knowing that everything is just how it's supposed to be. So there was all this white light around me. Behind me there was a big circle of white. And then within that there was a person, but it was just like a total white, white color of like the image of a person. Off that there was another shade of white kind of radiating off that. And again, it just felt, people ask me questions, did you have a body? I don't know, but it felt like I had a body because it felt so nice. It just like kind of knowing everything and, getting glimpses into some dramas in my life, and it's like, oh, I understand why. And even my car crash, you understood everything. Then the being from behind me said, you have to go back. Your father wants you to stay. As soon as the being said that, I knew the father was God, not my physical father. In the spirit of everything is okay and everything's good, I went back into my body. I came to 3 days later in the hospital. My understanding of all this really happened, as I mentioned, part of what happened was I just started meeting people that knew about this stuff. And, I mentioned it to a few people here and there, but it's not like you'd say it and people go, oh, a near-death experience. They kind of look at you like you're a little, a little crazy or something. But one thing that happened that I didn't even realize, I knew it happened, but I didn't realize how cool it was because I went back to Colorado for a while, then I moved back to New York, and in Westchester, in Tarrytown, New York I was living, and someone knocked on my door. I opened the door, there was this beautiful woman there, and she said to me, my sister is a good friend of yours from Colorado, and she told me some cool things about you. And it ended up, that was one of the people I mentioned my near-death experience to. And this woman said she knew someone who knew about this stuff and, taught people about what happens after we die. And she introduced me to him. And he was a Sufi sheikh, which is, Sufism is part of the Islamic religion. And so as soon as she mentioned this guy, I need to meet this guy. I need to hear what he has to say. So I followed up on that, and I ended up studying with him for a long time, about 10 years, when he started to talk to me about 3 different things that just like, when you get an aha moment. So the first thing he talked about was Mary and how much Mary loved God and how open she was to the Christ energy coming in. And I said, whoa, that was like my feeling, that love coming in. And then he talked about Jesus. And as soon as he said that, I knew that being behind me was Jesus. And then he talked about the ocean of divine love and benevolence. And I knew that white light around me, that's what it described. And even now I say that, I kind of want to close my eyes and float away in that ocean of light, Like it was white here, but then there was, and someone said, so you could see behind you. And I thought, I didn't even think of that. I just knew it wasn't really seeing. It was more like being a part of it. For years, I didn't really talk to people about it. And I was teaching a class at the University of Bridgeport in Bridgeport, Connecticut, on mindfulness, breathing, and meditation. And after the class, a woman said to me, she was teaching a class on death and dying. And, I'd heard of near-death experience before, and so I was using that. And I said I had a near-death experience. She got so excited and said, you need to come talk to my class. And then I posted something on Facebook, and, I was so surprised how many people were interested. I didn't realize it had become a thing. But my process has always been more about spiritual growth and becoming a better person. And I just started learning from people how to channel this healing energy and that loving, warm, knowing. Again, the billion times. It's like infinite, because when you connect into it, it's like all the way in every direction. It's not, there's no way to, we feel in our heart, but then you go, whoosh, and it's like, oh my God, this is the greatest thing. There was something about it that was almost timeless. That's one of the questions people ask me. It didn't seem, then when I start to try to connect, then it's like, oh, it's kind of floating and there's no time. It didn't seem like a very long time. Like some people say, oh, it seemed like 3 years or whatever. I didn't experience that. I remember certain situations that happened. Again, in my mind, I didn't really know what to make of it. So, I knew the one thing that was undeniable, my hands would become warm and sometimes hot when I would touch people, even going to shake hands or, just touch someone like that. And one time I was with a friend and he twisted his ankle, and I just instinctually reached out to try to help put my hands on it, and he said, wow, it started to feel better, like right away. And again, it wasn't like, oh, healing abilities, because I didn't even know those words, so I kind of stumbled across it, and meeting people. The Sufi sheikh would say I'm a sensitive, which I knew, for a man to hear that isn't always a compliment, but I knew it was from him, because when that woman first came to see me, she actually gave me one of these guy's books, and his teacher called him a sensitive. So I knew he was talking about being sensitive to spiritual information and, knowing things and all that.